Hamas says it's ready to begin talks immediately on a US-backed proposal for a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. Now, this plan would involve a phased release of hostages and a significant increase in humanitarian aid to the territory. Now, Donald Trump says Israel has already accepted the terms, but Israeli forces are still carrying out airstrikes, and rising summer temperatures are adding to the suffering of civilians.
An escape from the heat in Gaza. With clean water in short supply, many come to the sea to bathe. But the salty water brings other problems with it.
There isn't any clean water in the bathrooms, nor for drinking. People shower with the seawater and go to sleep. After that, spots form on the skin.
This beach in Han Yunis is lined with tents for displaced people. They're made of plastic and nylon and are too hot in the daytime. With no electricity for fans, people are desperate for shade.
Every 10 minutes we go back and forth between the tent and the sea because the weather is so hot. Before October 7th, we were living. Today we're not. We're enduring humiliation, war, hunger, a lack of water. There is nothing.
Aid groups warn of the spread of disease, exacerbating already dire conditions in Gaza. Israel has also been ramping up attacks in the territory. The United Nations says more than 600 people have been killed near aid convoy and distribution points since the US-based Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began operations there in May.
They are not feeding people, they are killing people. And we do not want them, and we do not want this American aid center. They should stop it as soon as possible because every day there are 100 martyrs there.
Israel denies reports of extensive casualties at distribution sites. It says it's fired only warning shots and is looking into reports of civilian harm.
Giorgio Cafiero is the CEO and founder of Gulf State Analytics. He joins us from Key West in Florida. Good to have you with us again, Giorgio. Now, looking at the prospects of a ceasefire at the moment, what are your thoughts? Are we on a serious step towards a lasting agreement?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on your program. You know, there seems to be quite a bit of optimism that the parties are going to be moving toward ceasefire right now. I think the Qataris and the Egyptians have been certainly working very hard to try to get us to this point as the mediators in these talks. But I think it's always important for us to keep in mind that until the parties agree to the terms of a ceasefire, they have yet to agree to the terms of a ceasefire. And for those of us who have been looking at the conflict in Gaza since October 2023, we know that there have been many times when we have had reason to think that a diplomatic breakthrough was on the horizon, and then there were issues that caused setbacks. So I think what we can say is at best, there's reason to be cautiously optimistic about Israel and Hamas agreeing to a ceasefire. But again, until one comes across the line, we're not quite yet there. There are some issues that do remain stumbling blocks, and whether the parties can overcome those stumbling blocks remains to be seen.
I mean, part of the issue is also just how far apart these sides are. Hamas saying it wants a permanent end to the war. Israel saying it wants to keep fighting until Hamas is actually destroyed. So how can the mediators bridge this gap?
Well, that's kind of the key question. You know, as you mentioned, there are the two sides definitely have differences that will be hard to overcome. Netanyahu's government is making it clear that they want Hamas and all resistance factions in Gaza to essentially abandon resistance. And we know that that's not going to actually happen. That's not something that Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad would ever be able to agree to. So there has to be compromises on both sides. And that's usually how ceasefires come into effect in this conflict and other conflicts too. is we see concessions on both sides. So those on the Hamas side and the Israel side will have to sort of step back from maximalist demands. And it's not clear that that's going to be possible. But I do think that what this really comes down to is the extent to which the Trump administration is going to put pressure on Israel to back away from some of those maximalist demands. And if the Trump administration decides to use American leverage to get Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire, I think there's good reason to expect this to happen at some point soon. I'll just add to this point here that Trump really wants to present himself not only to the American electorate, but to the world at large as a peacemaker. And he has not been successful when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. All your viewers are aware of how his efforts to bring Iran into a new nuclear deal with the United States did not go so well last month, to put it mildly. So I think now Trump really wants to present himself as a leader who brought Gaza and Israel into a ceasefire. And this is important to Trump's agenda. So I think we might have some reason to expect the White House to pressure Israel into backing off from some of its most maximalist demands. But again, until the parties actually agree to something, we're still not quite there. So I describe my optimism as being very cautious at this point.
And Giorgio, just before we wrap up, we've seen just in our report there about the state of things on the ground in Gaza with civilians. Where does food aid factor into this whole negotiation?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, the humanitarian disasters in Gaza are very, very serious. And my understanding is that one of the key points that's at the heart of these ceasefire, this talk of a ceasefire, would be allowing UN and the international community, the Red Cross, to come in and provide Gaza with the humanitarian assistance it needs. There have obviously been these huge restrictions on aid coming into Gaza. And so that certainly is one of the points of leverage that the American and Israeli side have, is to help alleviate some of the very serious human suffering by permitting higher levels of humanitarian aid to come in. There's no doubt that throughout this genocide in Gaza, the American-Israeli side has definitely put pressure on Hamas and by extension the rest of Gaza by withholding humanitarian aid. So I think that's sort of one of the key points here.
Okay. Giorgio Cafiero, CEO and founder of Gulf State Analytics, thanks for speaking to us.